Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for coming back again and watching On the Town with Tanya. We appreciate you. Today's guest is an ambassador at Survivor Against Violence Everywhere, New England. She is a co-host of Stop Child Abuse Now talk show, and she is also an incest child abuse survivor and the author of a great book, Listen to the Cry of the Child. Please welcome Barbara Joy Hansen. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, thank you, Tanya, for having me and allowing me to have my voice heard today.
Oh, we thank you for even showing up and spreading your word and sharing your story. It's a very powerful and very helpful when people share their story. So we thank you. So just to get right into it, first, I'd like to start out with stats. Today, people, that's a big pet peeve of mine, which I'm sure is of everyone's, any kind of child abuse at all. And sexual child abuse is the most horrific thing I think that could possibly happen to a child, because they don't even get a chance to ever be the right or the robust adult that they could have been. Right. So that even if we get healing, we find healing. I'm a former victim. If we find healing, that's not to say that we won't be great people and do great things. We usually do. But there's still always that little piece that could have been, just lost. So it's very dear to my heart. And that's why we're talking about it. And we appreciate Barbara for coming and sharing her book and her story. So, Barbara, tell us just a little bit of stats if you have some on hand.
Yes, 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 5 boys have been molested. Every 2 minutes, a child is molested. Victims are 4 times more likely than the general population to be depressed and commit suicide. And incest is an act of violence. But the biggest statistic is in Sports Illustrated, coaches abusing their children. And of course, we've heard about the Olympic coaches abusing kids, the doctor that got in prison. 120 to 350 children are molested in Sports Illustrated, quoted in Charisma May 2000 magazine, before getting caught. Pedophiles molest 150 to 350 children. As much as 89% of all sexually abusive events occur by a relative.
Yes, I saw that. It's just, when I think of the numbers, it's just staggering to me that 35% are 11 and younger. What they say, 4 million people are referred to and reported. But guess what? Only, what is it? Only, let me see, it's 4 million are referred. There are 7.2 million victims, and then only about 2.9 million. Actually,
and men are responsible for 90 to 90% of currently reported abuse cases. And a lot of people are in prison as a result of sexual abuse, and there's no hope. I'm a prison evangelist, and I've been in so many prisons worldwide, all over the world, and I've met pedophiles. I've spoken at conferences, at prison conferences, with sex offender in the room, telling his story and me telling mine. So I'm an expert in the field, not that I chose to be, nor you, but it is definitely a calling that I have near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. It is a very devastating thing. And I've worked with offenders also. I get that. How about this? First, we'll share your story, just a piece of your story. So I put a trigger warning, but there really isn't a trigger warning because Barbara's able to tell her story without the trauma, without the, what's the word I'm looking for?
Details.
Without
details. Yeah, I don't go graphic.
We don't go graphic. And purposely, I don't do it because there's some people that actually enjoy that. And so I don't like to do that for that reason. But so there's no trigger warning, but there is a trigger warning. Some people may not even like this topic. So that's fine. I respect that. Just share the video if you can, because somebody's watching who may be going through it right now, a child going through it, or an adult who knows of someone that's going through it. And you have to be able to give information if you're going to help somebody. You can't help anybody if you don't know anything. So that's why we do these stories. So thank you. And be my guest. Please share just a piece of your story. Should I play that video first and then you tell it? What do you think about that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
Sure.
I'm going to show a video, guys. Just a little quick, literally a quick video of Barbara from childhood to the great things that she's done now. It's a real quick video, but she'll give us explanation after. Okay. Here we go. So let's see. And this is that's her book. That's her as toddler. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm Dr. Asha. Okay. All right. So thank you. So now go ahead, share with us your story.
I have been called on the front lines to scream out, literally scream against sexual violence. Often the church doesn't want to clean its stained glass windows. And I'm a pastor's daughter. I grew up in the church. I grew up in a wonderful, happy, godly home. I thought I had to leave it to Beaver family, which none of us do. But I have a visual here, stained glass pane. I wept and I cried.
Hold it up a
And
little.
they're holding
Wait,
each other.
wait, hold
They're
it up a
holding-
little. Hold it up. Yeah. Oh, wow. You did
They're
that?
holding each other with tears coming down the stained glass windows. And it says,
Oh,
I wept and I cried and I died inside, and a little piece of me shredded. And I was a Christian, and we are getting ripped apart, and the church is silent. So
Hmm.
I've been called into this ministry,
Mhm.
which is huge. Very few people have the vision
Mhm.
to do it.
Mhm.
And oh yeah, you've been ostracized, criticized, blamed, shamed, all that. Shame
Mhm.
says I did something wrong. Blame says something's wrong with me. Shame says I did a bad thing. Blame says I am a bad person. And if
Mhm.
you've been violated by someone, and I was tragically violated by my grandfather on my mother's side,
Mhm.
my cousins were molested by him. He took me out for rides in his car and unzipped himself, and I screamed trying to jump out of the car, and they were always out of ice cream, and he, I'm sure, ate it up before we came for a visit at Christmas time. I was on the radio one time telling my story, and someone said, oh, at least you were safe on Santa's lap. Well, my grandfather dressed up as Santa, so guess
Oh,
what? I hated Santa.
yeah.
So I speak wherever God opens doors, and I really want to thank you for allowing me to come on your show today. Let it not be said that I was silent when they needed me. So there's people listening today, and you'll get it out there all over for me. But why do child victims of sexual crimes carry their secrets without disclosing them for decades or maybe through a lifetime? Sexual abuse is a double sickness. You have a normal life in your home here, and then over here, you're being molested. So it produces guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, nightmares, sadness, isolation, withdrawal, panic attacks. I had nightmares. I would scream in the middle of the night. And when I wrote my book, my mother reminded me of that. And she said, I held you and I kicked her. And I said, you're not my mommy. I was not even awake at that time because I was so traumatized. And you can be traumatized by your child being hit or killed by a car or domestic violence. I went through sexual domestic violence with pornography coming in my marriage, and then infidelity. And my husband and I are still together, which is a miracle.
Right.
If he hadn't been willing to go to therapy and own up and having me tell him what he did, and then me grieving my losses, we would never be married today. And we have been married 58 years.
Wow.
Even though I don't look that old. I'm very blessed. I have good genes.
You
But
do.
yeah, so spiritual abuse, that one I just showed, you want to know what that is. You're questioned by a pastor, and you feel less than to perform by their standards. So the elders in a particular church that we went to questioned my authority after I wrote my book. This is my book, and you showed a picture of it.
Yes, listen to the cry of the child. You can pick it up on your time, guys.
Silence of sexual abuse. So I go into great detail without getting graphic in my book.
Right.
And so my call to ministry was questioned. They said, you're not healthy enough to teach a support group, which I was doing. You're not healthy enough to be in the church and work with kids. I was teaching junior church and then the praise choir in that particular church. I had to document every phone call that came in, or if I saw Teen Challenge guys outside the grocery store, which I connected to because I connect to addicts. And every person I met, I had to document that. And after a few months or a few weeks, I told the woman, pastor, counselor, that I've had enough. And she said, don't allow anybody to dump on you, Barb. You've already gone through so much trauma and you are an expert and you have the ability to help others. So we have lived a frozen scream. PTSD is traumatic amnesia. I don't know if you know that, but traumatic amnesia is like the war vets. You are stuck in denial. You have no words, no understanding. I didn't know what he was doing to me. My grandfather, my uncle was also a pedophile. Yeah. And then I was molested at a camp, a Christian camp, when I was 11 and 12. He came back 2 summers. And the suppressed memories went way down deep. And you do a mind-body split to cope. So you live in isolation, you're overwhelmed, threats by family or perpetrator. Of course, they tell you don't tell. And so I didn't tell for 38 years. Groomed at a very early age. You're not believed when you do tell. And it's a void of trust. It took me a long time to trust my husband again after that happened in our marriage. And that's a chapter in my book called Beyond Betrayal. So I might mention that if you want a copy of my book, you can get that from me at my email address, bobbyjoyhansen@juno.com. And I want to tell you why the cover has a picture of a garbage heap on it, on the bottom of the cover. It's because God woke me up 3 nights in a row from deep sleep with a vision of the cover on my book. And I saw my face on the cover, the little girl, and it was like you're hijacked by somebody that wants to do things to you. And so there was a tossed airplane, a tossed baby doll crying, a toy airplane, baby carriage. I couldn't understand, why me? Why am I supposed to write a book? But God said, my child, there's life in that clay pot. Someone tossed out. It's cracked and no one wanted it. Your life's been broken and poured out as an offering, a drink offering, with passion and a purpose to give hope to others like you. There's a seed in that flower pot that's growing with a beautiful rose, which is blooming and blossoming. My life, once dead, is now born again like that rose, fragile and fragrant. The things that I didn't want to talk about, I'm talking about now, because all those that are calling in and that will continue to hear my story will get encouraged and will get hope. They're going to think, wow, you went through so much. Another thing I went through was postpartum depression. I couldn't conceive a baby, and you don't even hear that statistic. No. Sexual abuse victims or survivors, I'm no longer a victim, I'm a victorious survivor, have health problems. And I had trouble getting pregnant. I told my OBGYN, and he said, don't try so hard. Well, I wanted a baby desperately. I'd go in the department stores and touch the baby clothes and see my friends getting pregnant. People, a little old lady in the church my daddy pastored said, why aren't you having a baby? Why aren't you? They have no business asking you that. So after I tried for so long, we adopted our firstborn child. So there's a chapter in my book about adoption and the birth mother's story, and then my story, and a poem. And after adopting our son, Todd, 5 months later, I got pregnant. So our children are 14 years apart. And then 7 years later, we had another little boy. So we have 3 grown sons now.
Really?
So the postpartum depression, I want to tell that because people don't talk about that. After I had my second child, after we adopted and I got pregnant, and then we had Brian, you suffer 50 to 60% of women suffer from mild baby blues a few weeks after the birth. But mine was larger. Mine was 50% go unnoticed and undiagnosed. You're all alone. You want to run away from your life. And I really wanted to run away.
Yeah, but also, there's one thing also you forgot. When you're a victim, having a baby will trigger that, especially around the age that you were. That's another thing.
Yeah. And the pregnancy and caring for a newborn creates or revs up the stress of taking care of a newborn child. So I also want to tell about the post-traumatic stress disorder a little bit more. It's a numbness. You are so numb, you can't talk about it, you cannot deal with it. It's crippling. You're hostage to your past. You wear a mask, and I want to move over because I want you to see this mask that I have here. That's me as a little girl. And in my support group, I teach Beauty Out of Ashes. I hand out masks to the girls that are, I've also taught men, but it's better for me to stick with women. Who am I? A victim. I was shamed, blamed, enabled, condemned, controlled, living in a dungeon, damaged, blackness, shackled, despair. I thought I was all those things. And then I passed down a mask and asked the women in the group, how do you see Barb? Be honest. And they saw me as a butterfly, gentle, released, happy, peaceful, wings, author, purpose, soul, healed, caring, warrior, soldier. So they see me that way. You see yourself totally different than others see you. And when I went back to my high school reunion and my husband's college reunion, they were shocked I wrote a book. They were shocked I was an abuse survivor. I couldn't tell for 38 years. You couldn't tell, Tanya, I'm sure.
Yeah, nobody can never tell. They always people assume a lot of things, and they don't. How do you say it? And then when you do tell them, they still don't. They believe you, but they don't want to believe you. So they actually sometimes take side of the abuser and do things that are just ludicrous. It's like, I just told you what happened to me, and you're letting this person babysit your kid. Wow. Okay, so we know where you're at. So people do that all the time. But I no longer get upset. I actually say, I just pray for the children that are going to be around those people that did not get help. So it's not like, even though in my personal opinion only, not professional, not even any other, just my personal opinion, I don't believe a actual pedophile could ever be helped. That's just my personal opinion. Now, some people say, oh, say Ken, no, you can't. When you get to a certain age, if you're a child doing it, that yes. If you're a grown adult, I'm talking about 30 plus, and you're doing that, I don't believe, and I could be absolutely wrong, this is just my belief only, I don't believe that there is there's any hope at all, because it is something that is so ingrained and so embedded and so twisted from your childhood that has never gotten any help, that it's kind of late to reverse it. So unless you have a lobotomy, I don't think anything's really going to help you, because it's not even about sex, as you know, sexual abuse. It's not about
let me interject something there about what you just said about the pedophile. It's any inappropriate sexual contact with children without consent. It can be visual, seeing a picture. It can be somebody coming out of the woods and exposing himself to you. It can be psychological, physical, inappropriate touching to rape.
Yes.
God's created male and female to please one another. And unfortunately, it becomes a hatred for your own soul. Pleasure versus poison, desire versus terror leaves the victim powerless and filled with shame. In the heart of every person attracted to children is a very lost child. Something bad happened in their childhood to prey upon children. Their childhood was lost. That doesn't mean that I'm supposed to go on and repeat this. And, sexually, I could never do that. I love children too much. So I have deep emotional wounds, and the sex offenders does too. And maybe they're in an angry alcoholic home or doing drugs to escape. I spoke in a workshop in the Family Prisoner Conference, and they couldn't even fit another person in the room because he told his story. The sex offender served over 17 years in prison, and when he got out, he contacted me for my book, and I said, why don't you send in your paper proposal and get it into this conference? And he said, oh, they'd never accept me. Well, they did, and he asked me, would you mind speaking in the same room as me? And I said, no, because I want to know. I want to hear your story. I want to know why you do what you did or why you did it.
Right.
And I did learn a lot from him. And he
Of
said,
course.
just like alcohol, you can have, if I'm in a city by myself and my wife isn't here, he was married. He said, I could go out and get a kid as, quick as I wanted to. But he said, I have to get down on my knees and pray and ask God to take that desire away. It could be alcohol or drugs or any kind of desire. Now, my addiction was codependency with addicts, with a heroin male prostitute. I have deep empathy, and I'm sure you do too, because somebody that's gone through
What, for the pedophile?
No, I have deep empathy for people that are hurting. I call them Jesus tears. If you can't cry, I can tell somebody's been abused when I see their faces. So my husband and I went into prison. We were put together with a male heroin addict. He had deep soul wounds. I connected with him because I did too. And he started writing letters to me. That is number one red flag, but I didn't know it then. I wasn't whole. I hadn't written my book, but I became enmeshed. It was a training ground for me for years of codependency. And then I had to turn a deaf ear to him and all others. And I started teaching women addicts. Beauty Out of Ashes is my support group that I teach. It's a 12-step group. And it really helps you overcome. So I've learned so much about myself. I learned that I had to let go of this guy who came in and out of our home, out of crack houses, out of prisons over an 8-year period. Every time he'd get out, he'd call me, and I'd try to get him in another rehab. And I did, but that wasn't the right thing for me to do because I wasn't whole. I had empathy towards him because he was an abuse survivor. So God's given me deep compassion for the underdog, for the ostracized, for those that are hurting and abused.
Well, I have compassion for everybody, but I'm still working. God is not done with me yet. I'm working on, what do they call it? 2 things: forgiveness, which I have forgiveness, but beyond that, just the word sounding it sounds good. But like really just meshing it in and be like, I still do not believe a victim has to forgive. Everyone else says, even the pastors, the clergy, everyone says, you're not going to go to heaven if you don't forgive him, but he'll go to heaven if he asks, or she, mostly he, asks for forgiveness. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. So
they have no right telling you that.
Exactly. I'm not a fan of that kind of preaching because to me, that tells me a red flag that, whoa, if you're telling me that God's going to actually bring this guy to heaven that sexually abused babies, and I can't go because I won't forgive him, I have a problem with that. So forgive me, but I like to stick to how to help the victims and what that looks like. Because for me, once you've done that, for me, you can't come back. For me, I can always bring the child back as a child and prevent them from being that pedophile. I can do that, but we can't. Once he's done his thing or her thing, because there are women too. I knew a few. There are women. So, and that's another story in another show. But you really can't. I mean, it's happened. Some people have said, "Oh, I've never did it again." And I was like, "Okay, I don't live your life, so I don't know." But good for you. That's great. I'm hoping that there is a hope for somebody. But for me, I like to stick to how can we help our children. What does that look like? Because that's who I'm really focusing on. And people who want to help, parents who may not have the what's the word? They may have 5 or 6 kids in the house. I don't know, 2 kids, and maybe overstressed, so they don't realize Janie's upset every day and something's wrong with her. But to me, I'm like, you should know if a 2-year-old's being messed with. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, you do know.
There's a bunch of signs, and especially kids that are groomed, which I want to talk to you about. There's a bunch of signs, I say it again, for kids that are groomed, that especially for toddlers. And the one big one for you is they start doing sexual behavior or talking sexual things that you've never heard them say before. That's the number one sign.
It is.
And everyone ignores it. And I know it's weird. You don't know what that looks like when it first happens. But trust me, when your kids never talked about, and yes, they do discover their parts. We know that. I'm not talking about that. Like, look, Mom, I have this. I'm not talking about that. That's, what that is. That's normal. I'm talking about other things that are like, oh, they used this or they did that or this, those kind of talks. you're like, wait, what'd you say? That's the ones that you got to start raising your eyes and just, gently asking things like, oh, so who did you play that game with? Like, so you want to scare them and you don't want to make them feel bad about themselves. Right. And so you have to do it in a very clever way that's not shaming them or making them feel like something went wrong. That's one.
One of the best books I read when I was starting to heal is called The Wounded Heart by Dan B. Allender. Mm-hmm. And in it, he says, people think sexual abuse is all about sex. Mm-hmm. Sexual abuse can be defined as any sexual activity, visual, verbal, physical, mm-hmm. engaged in without consent, exploiting a person in order to meet the other person's emotional or sexual needs, leading to power and control. And he says in the book, incest is one secret that holds its victims in the tightest of chains, leading to guilt, confusion, and fear, creating a dungeon from which there seems no escape. Even after the physical abuse, you're still held prisoner. Incest is fondling or sexual stimulation between closely related persons, and it's not normal. It is not normal between a parent and a child or grandparent or uncle, leaving that child with deep emotional lasting scars.
Yes.
I also want to tell about how I was able to face the sex offender, because very, very few people can do that. And I didn't even know that I would be doing that.
Yes. Well, did both get convicted, by the way? Both? Your uncle and the grandpa?
No, my grandfather was dead. I wanted to confront him. My mother was taking care of him. My grandmother had died. Okay. But no, I couldn't. I just did not have the ability to say anything to him. And I didn't write about my uncle being a molester in the book. But my cousins told me one day when I was maybe 8 or 9, behind the garage, that he was doing things to them. So I avoided him.
Do, by the way. So just a note, the family's watching, it's never usually one. I guarantee it.
It never is. Always more. Yeah. So in 1998, I went back to the youth camp. It was a church camp, and we have a cabin there. I went back there where the evil was exposed. I saw a best friend I connected with her in the afternoon. She was an intake counselor, and she and I talked briefly. She hadn't had courage to go back to the camp for 27 years, in spite of her parents being clergy as well as mine, and she couldn't go back. I found out later in the evening, she came to me weeping, and she said, there's so much emptiness, pain, and defeat with addictions. And I told her the sex offender's name because I knew that she had been molested when she was weeping like that. And she said, me too. So she went back to her pastor's wife in Ohio. She said, and she contacted me. She said, Barb, you know enough about sex offenders. Let's expose the sin with this clergy. And so she contacted Colorado Springs. Now they've moved to Ohio. It's the Christian and Missionary Alliance campgrounds. And we both wrote letters. That was the hardest thing that I ever did, to get quiet in the dining room and write a letter to the committee. We formed 8 clergy and a psychologist, where no stone was unturned, because they wanted to find out if there were more victims. And of course there were. But some people did not want to come forward, because if you tell the committee that you're a victim or that you've been victimized, then of course everybody's going to know. So I was already starting to teach my support group. So I told her, I said, I'll go with you to Florida. They set up a discipline hearing and restoration for us. There were 4 of us now, my friend, and I called one of my best friends who went through abortions as well. And you don't go in church and say, oh, guess what, Pastor, I just had an abortion. People don't even talk about that secret. Now, that's something I did not have, but I have many, many friends that have had abortions. So that was in 1998. 1997, 1 year earlier, in Mamu Alliance Academy in Gabon, Guinea, South Africa. There was a boarding school with lots and lots of missionary children. And if you go on my website, it's called All God's Children. There's a short video about these missionary kids. For the sake of the gospel, their parents were separated from these kids, which I could never send my kid to a mission school that I knew nothing about. They were flown
Especially with Westerners, I'm sorry, especially with Westerners leading the way. I'm sorry to say it. And all the missionary churches, I'm sorry to say, they're failing those kids badly as far as very bad.
Yeah, and I mean, I love my kids too much to send them to somebody I didn't know. And
Yeah.
so all these kids were abused in some way or other. 34 of them came forward, Tanya.
At least that's the ones that could tell. The rest couldn't tell. Especially and this is the thing, the little boys never tell usually.
I know they don't.
So that's the horror of it. We don't even know. They don't care if it's boy, girl. They don't care. They're doing both, and they're not telling. And unfortunately, so we have to remember, people, it's not just one. It's never one. I guarantee. I'll say never. I won't say never. It's 99.9% never one when it comes to a child. If you did it to one child, I guarantee you there are many more. And if you're a person of authority, like a clergy, a preacher, a rabbi, or any of those, then it's thousands. I hate to say that. And think of all the priests. How many? I mean, I know people now in their 50s and 60s who were molested by priests when they were young in different countries, like Italy and Ireland, and they are jacked. You see what I'm saying? It's important that we share all the information and not hide it and hold it back and candy coat it because, we don't want to hurt. I don't care about hurting anybody's feelings anymore.
No, either. Me either.
We've cared so long. That's why there's so many victims.
So these kids were in a remote jungle in Africa where they had no phones, no cell phones, nothing. The kids were separated from their siblings, and they had there was abuse going on, not just sexual. When they had to have their teeth pulled, the kids' hands were tied behind their backs, and they'd pull their teeth.
Oh my God!
There were all kinds of things. So when they all came out with their story, a lot of them became gay. A lot of them left the church. A lot of them, wanted nothing to do with Christianity. Now, my faith got stronger as a result of my story, of my testimony. But they set up an independent council or investigation, and they said, what will this cost our denomination? What will these adults need therapy? Will there be lawsuits? Will we be embarrassed? No, we need to do the right thing. So they set up a committee of restoration and a retreat, and all these adult kids went to the retreat to get help. And the Christian Missionary Alliance has set up a workbook for churches, a safe place, to help pastors have windows on the door and different things in that workbook to help churches. But a lot of churches don't deal with it.
Right. Well, wow. Well, I'm sorry that that those poor kids. I hope that they get the help. We glitched for a minute, so we'll keep talking. I apologize.
All right.
I'm not sure about what this glitch is, but it's okay. I feel bad for those kids because and as soon as I hear missionaries now in Africa, I always get worried because I saw documents and videos of people that are on these missionaries that are not good. There are some that are good. My friend goes, I know that those kids are in good love when she goes. I'm not saying that. I'm saying many have gone to Africa to purposely destroy those kids, and that is horrible and wrong. And I don't know why Africans keep letting these missionaries in. I don't know. I can't understand the concept of that. I'd rather live dirt poor and not have anything than to have someone destroy my kid's mind, because you can't come back. You can't make a comeback from that. So what do you think? When you actually was able to go and get help, what's the key moment in your soul that led you to that?
After one of our sons got married, my parents were elderly and they were in our home, and my mother came downstairs as my father and I were arguing. We were taking in addicts. I was teaching them, and my father said, "You don't run a safe place or a safe house." And I didn't, I stumbled through some of the things I was doing too, but I desperately wanted to tell my mother what my grandfather, her father, had done. I knew in my gut that she was a victim, and yet I couldn't talk to her about it. Every time I'd want to, I couldn't. My mouth was shut down. So
Yes.
when she heard my daddy and I arguing, she
Mhm.
came in the middle of this arguing. She said, and she said, "What are you talking about?" And my father said, "Maybe you should tell her now," because I had told my father 3 years prior, thinking because he's a clergy, he could help me. He
Right.
didn't have any training. He couldn't help me. He wept for me. He felt horrible knowing that this happened at the camp where we had our cottage, but he couldn't do anything because he had no training. Now, with our denomination, they do have training in seminary for these uh, for students to learn about sex abuse and what it does and all the statistics and things that happens. And I've
Mhm.
spoken in colleges and schools all over the world and prisons as well.
But one thing, did he didn't want to go and press charges or anything? Like I mean, I mean, I'm thinking fathers. First thing my father would, well, not to say that.
Well, we didn't know where the sex offender was at that point. I was watching Oprah on Family Secrets that particular day with my mother.
All
And my
right.
mother and I said, before she went upstairs to get her jammies on and come down in the middle of this argument, she and I were agreeing, yes, we need to tell our secrets. And I was thinking, oh, wow, wouldn't that be neat if I could do that? Then she
Mhm.
comes down and we're arguing. And my daddy said, maybe you should tell her now, because I had told him 3 years before.
Right.
And Pandora's box flew open, wide
Wow.
open, the
Wow.
gates of hell. And
Wow.
I ran downstairs, got my husband, and I grabbed his hand. I said, I'm going to tell my mom and dad both. Came upstairs, held their hands. I started weeping as I told both my parents. But I started out by saying, I know something bad happened to you, Mom. And my father took his hand and put it on her arm and said, no, 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 it didn't happen to you. He wanted to shut her down, not really wanting to hear the secrets. And she said, yes, it did happen to me. And I want Bobby to know. They call me Bobby Joy. And she wanted me to know that my grandfather had indeed done it to her. And the next morning she crawled in bed with me and we talked about it and she told me some things. And I used the material in my support group to go to their elderly assisted living and share it with my mother and help her heal in her 90s.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was so good for me to have that closure.
See, yeah, the closure, that's what I'm talking about. The closure is crucial because it's one thing if something happens and everybody just goes their own way and just becomes traumatized and leave it at that and start doing drugs and start acting out,
Right.
start being pedophiles as well, whatever, all those things that come with that. And then it's another for, especially for family, because family, you can't just throw them away sometimes. Personally speaking, I mean, for me, if someone does that to me, I thank you for the sorry. I was blessed to get 2 apologies from both of my abusers before one died and one while I was living. So I appreciate that so much. It really helps
Oh,
a hundred.
yeah.
But I can't sit down and have crumpets and tea with you at this
No,
point. It's
no.
just a weird. And here's the part: when when you're traumatized like this, you're not just losing. You didn't just lose your body and your mind, right? You
Right.
lost your family because even if everybody agrees with you, there's still now a funky dynamics. So those Sunday dinners we used to have, they're not the same.
No, they're not.
Christmas is never going to be the same. And then you stop going because you're like, why am I subjecting myself to being sitting next to this person? And I don't want to. So when it's in a family, it's really hard because
Right.
now you have to make a choice. I have to give up all these people that I love to keep my sanity. Or am I going to sit at the table and pretend like nothing ever happened and have cheese and crumpets and act like this didn't happen to me at 2 years old and 4 years old? We're not talking about 30-year-old adults. We're talking about
No.
children.
Right.
And that to me is I can't explain it to me. A lot of people say, "Oh, I forgive them. It's no big deal. I'm over it." Blah 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 blah.
You never get over it.
We've had deep-rooted therapy and deep-rooted meditation and I mean, like a lot of work. I'm talking about 30 years worth of work.
Yeah.
It took me 30 years of work to get to where I'm at now, and I still have moments where I'm like, But so it's a work. But here's the thing: we have to understand that victims do not have to stay combined to that family that traumatized them. For me, for my mother, if I'm 2 years old and my mother was not handling her business and saying, wait, something's wrong with my child, I got a problem with that. And the victim in me wouldn't have a problem. I'd be like, because I didn't for years. I was like, oh no, that's all right. They didn't know any better. But I don't want to make excuses for them anymore, because it's just, I just can't explain it. But 2 years old, 1 year old, 9 months old, you don't know something's wrong. Like, come on, like really? And so
mine happened, Tanya, mine happened around 2 years old, two or three, with my grandfather, and 11 and 12 by the clergy. And then I was raped at 18 at a college by a student. And grieving my losses, that's the key for me, besides having support. Sexual assault or abuse is a death-like experience, dark night of the soul. No one can fully comprehend or understand except another who's been there. That's why I appreciate your having me on today, because you get it. You understand me.
Oh, yes.
And you're traumatized by the crimes, and they are crimes, sex crimes against us. Yes. Grief wears many disguises and doesn't always come as death knocking at your door. Sometimes it's expected, other times unexpected. But unless you grieve all your losses, one after the other, you will end up lost forever, locked in a prison with no walls or corpses. In writing my book, I began the process of grieving chapter by chapter, many of the losses. And let me tell you, that helped me come forward and be able to help other survivors heal.
Did you also do the therapy piece?
My therapy was my 12-step New International Version devotional Bible. It's a Bible unlike any other I've ever gotten. It's got a lot of the answers and awareness and shame and blame and all kinds of things in it. Adam and Eve shamed each other and blamed each other, and that's where it all started. And if you end up blaming your whole life, you won't ever be whole. Now, maybe I'm not entirely whole yet. I don't know. I know we will be when we go to heaven, if we know Jesus in our heart.
Right.
And
well, I have a problem with not a problem. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but I was a preacher kid. My mom was a minister.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a preacher since I was 7. So and she used to tell me I'm going to be called to preach. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? I run around doing motivational speaking, pretty much preaching. Yeah. But so here's my thing, and we used to have great debates on this. Is that, remember, there's a lot of people that were sexually abused by clergy. So therefore, we know that the Bible is often used as a shield and a weapon. And I believe that a lot of pedophiles and people of that light and negative light are hiding right in the church, under the church, in the Bible, and using scriptures, quoting them like they God. And for instance, like one gentleman, I won't say name, of course, I would never do that, but he said it's in relation to child sex abuse and forgiveness, which we can talk about forgiveness. And most people say, all the pastors said, it is imperative that you forgive, because you can't move forward without forgiving, and the Lord will not bless you unless you forgive, and all this other stuff. And I was like, listen, when you started talking about God won't forgive me, you lost me. You lose the victim, right? You lost me right away. Because here's what you should be saying is, it is your choice to forgive or not to forgive. And the reason why you want to forgive is because it does bring an interpersonal closing for you. That does not mean that I like the abuser. That does not mean I will sit and talk to the abuser. That doesn't mean that they can even be in my camp. What it means for me is that, okay, I can breathe. I've let that go. That's what it means for me, right? Yeah. But people misinterpret that, and they want to say that the guy said something like, it says in the Bible that if you don't forgive, you can't get into the gates of heaven if you don't forgive. I was like, what is he talking about? What scripture he's quoting? But my mama knew the Bible inside out, and I knew the Bible inside out, and I don't remember Jesus saying that. I just don't remember. So forgive me, but I'm adamant about that, because some people who are abused by clergy as well, I believe in spirituality, and I believe in God. But some people don't like to say church and all that stuff, because for obvious reasons. I mean, if you were affected by the church, you're not going to really want to go to church or hear anything about church. You'll be atheist, probably. And I respect that. As long as you have a spirituality, I'm good. That's what I'm working on. So I just wanted to clarify for people that, forgiveness, and you can tell me what that looks like. I know you forgave, and I commend people that forgive, but I'll give you an example of forgiveness that's not real. For instance, somebody, well, I won't say her name, a certain evangelist I'll just say she wears a lot of white. How about that? White clothes. I'll say that. And she has blonde hair. And she said she forgives her dad.
I
She
know
said
who you mean.
exactly. She says she forgives her dad. Well, then, okay, that would explain some of your weird behavior that's going on, because clearly you didn't get the healings you needed. So to me, just people saying, "Oh yeah, I forgive them," and I'm all this, that doesn't mean nothing to me. I can tell by people's actions and behaviors if they really are down with the Word of God and really are forgiving, as they say. And if they didn't forgive, they just said it because it just sounds so topical. Yeah, forgiveness. Yeah, it's a thing. I'm going to do it. No, you have to, it has to be from your heart, first of all. You have to really say, like, I actually do forgive you. But that doesn't mean that I'll be in your face, but I can actually forgive you. So I'm funny about those things. So forgive me that God's not through with me. He's working on me as we speak.
Yeah.
But tell me what forgiveness looks like from your standpoint of view. How about that?
Forgiveness is a process that begins with the first step of admitting we need God's help to lighten the darkness. I was in the dark for so long, and I want to tell you that it doesn't change your past. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't erase what happened. And if you don't feel that you can go to the person that harmed you or even pray for that person, at least pray for yourself, and God will do what he wants to do. For me, I don't know that I would be where I am. I know I wouldn't have probably written my book if I hadn't faced the clergy. Because when I walked in that room and saw this man, he was disheveled. He looked like one of the alcoholics we were working with. There was a psychologist that sat to my right, and the clergy that were walking me through it one at a time. There were 4 of us came in the room. I didn't expect to have that happen, but when I saw my friend at this camp and she said, "Let's go forward with it," I did. And when I walked in the room, I had about an hour and 3/4 of my story, my testimony of what he did and how he did it at the camp and in the lake and in the missionary lodge, sodomized and things like that with the kids. And so your wounds are really bleeding and you haven't worked through all this yet. But for me, if I hadn't walked in that room and saw him, and then I heard him say, now, up until this point, he was in complete denial. Oh, I didn't do it. I might have brushed against them, blah, blah, blah. No, he did. And yet he did look at me and he said, I know something's wrong with me. I told my wife, he said, but he said, I don't know if you can find it in your heart to forgive me. At that point, I was teaching the support group. Forgiveness is way down the link of the chain, way down. You may never do it. But for me, when he said that, I said, I wouldn't be here had I not been able to forgive. Yes, I forgive you. So it doesn't mean that you condone it. Right. They have to answer to God. He will. And so will all those that molest kids. And so we're hiding sometimes from ourselves or from the others if we don't work through our own stuff. And that's what I'm doing now. I had to go way back to all the people that betrayed me. And I didn't have to, but I did, including my husband, and forgive him. And he really appreciates, he tells me almost every day how much he loves me and how much he appreciates my staying with him. I didn't have to, but something deeper in me, something bigger than me, which was God, came forward in my life and help me do that. And you are helping me today.
That's amazing. I think that's amazing. One of the things I want to make sure people know, therapy is very, is in your self-care. Okay. What that looks like to me is therapy or support groups. What's another one? Right. Support groups are amazing. There's incest survivor support groups. There's regular, there's all types. You name it, there's a support group for it, whether it's codependency, whatever it is, there's a support group out there. And usually you can find one for free. So you just have to keep Googling until you find one in your local area. Call the Department of Social Services in your area. They usually know of someone somewhere or something called the 311 or 211, depending on where you live. That's very important because if a victim does not get any kind of therapy, does not go to any support groups, and no kind of NA meetings or group, anything that with the group formulated formula, which helps you process basically. Right. I hate to say it, but all that goes where? inside. And when it insides, it rots your insides. Most of us
Right.
end up with illnesses, heart attacks, overeating, oversexing, over whatever else you can think of, because we internalize it, right? And so to not this, and this is my former counseling skills, so forgive me for going left. But therapy to me is everything. I think I'm where I'm at because I did over 30 years worth of therapy. Now, what the truth is, the first 18 was because as a foster kid, you have to have therapy. So I had to do it. So, but after that, after I aged out at 21, I did 18, then 21 again. I sought out therapists that could specialize in these things, or that I felt comfortable with, to compartment, get this all out. Because it's like okay, you can heal from anything that happens to you, whoever's out there, anything. I don't care what it is. I have a friend that was buried alive at 9 years old. Okay, so and she's still alive. Now, do people have multiple personalities? Yeah, she does. But it's okay. You survived. So I'm telling you this: if you're a victim out there, I don't care if you're 10, I don't care if you're 20, whatever age you are, you can get through this. The catch is talking to the right people or person. That's the catch. Because when you process, you can take all that garbage and that trauma and throw it out on the floor. It's like a big puzzle. Scoop it up and then put it in your Louis Vuitton bag as you see fit, and store it where you want to, because now you've got it together. It takes years. It's not going to be 5 sessions and you're done. No, you need to do emotional what's it called? Emotional support everywhere. .com, things like that, meditational therapy. You need your little yoga. You need to know about exercising and walking to clear your head, to get the oxytocin, whatever you call it, in your brain, serotonin running in your brain. You need to do it's a bunch of modalities, but you have to do some form of therapy. Don't think for 1 minute that you're going to slide by, because I see people now who are like, oh, I'm fine, everything's great, and it's been 40 years and everything's fine. And I see little spits. It's like water spitting out of the little holes, it's like that. There's some. You see it. And I only see it because I worked in this field for so many years. So maybe that's why. And maybe because I'm a victim, I don't know. And I have a third eye, so maybe that's why. But I'm saying to you, because each spirit, to me, everybody matters, in my opinion. Everybody matters. Every victim matters. And you don't get to your greatness. You can't get to it because you're focused on, I'm traumatized and I got all this stuff on me, this bag, heavy weights on me, and I can't get them off. You can't get anywhere. You can't do anything. You're stuck. You're just stuck. I've seen people stay stuck, and they do fine, as they say, fine. They work and go to work, come home. But that's not, sometimes we need to be doing more than fine, people. We need to be finding our gifts. What is our gift? What did God call us here for? You have a specific reason to be here, and you can't find it if you're caught up in your trauma. You can't find it. So I'm saying, get therapy, find somebody. You can find free groups.
That's
if
right.
you need.
Every survivor needs support.
Yes,
I agree with you, Tanya. Every survivor isolates from others to avoid being hurt again, but we all need support from somewhere. And then you think, okay, well, who can I trust? Family, friends? Maybe they'll be angry or not understand. It doesn't matter who understands, as long as you understand yourself and what you've gone through. If you understand what happened to you and why you're the way you are, and support is so necessary to find that out. It's wonderful having support, and the layers upon layers come off. And then you start caring for yourself and taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. And that is the goal. And in that, one last thing we'll talk about before we end is spirituality. How can that help you? I believe it's a great way of helping people out of anything. If you have spirituality, you can roll through anything, because it is something that when everything else fails, everyone else fails, and they will fail. That spirituality in you is that thing. I can't explain it. That je ne sais quoi. I don't know how they say it. That takes hold and says everything's going to be okay. You don't even know how, but that little voice just, Tell me about that spirituality before we go. We only have 5 minutes left.
Okay. Well, if you don't have spirituality, for me, I have deep faith, and the call of God on my life, I had to listen to it. It was like a sound of a distant drum. I had a choice to either listen to it or pay a high price. And you do pay a price for speaking out. You will be persecuted. You will be ostracized. Either you listen to the voice of others and be silenced and victimized, or you listen to the voice of God. And he has taught me to listen to him and depend on him alone and listen for his still small voice. And he always prepares you. Like you said, every one of us have a call to do something. Not all of us are going to be doing what you're doing, Tanya, or what I'm doing. I've been a humanitarian aid worker in the Philippines. I prepared 7 sermons to preach over there. I didn't know I was going to preach sermons in prisons and men and women prisons and to pastors and universities and schools over there. But God knew. And I prepared them, and I went with risk taking. If you're not a risk taker, you won't go anywhere either. You got to step out of your comfort zone and risk and be who you are.
Absolutely. That is so important, to step out of your comfort zone. And with that, so the last thing I'll ask you is, what do you want people to take away from your book?
There are answers and awareness in my book that I know will help you, will help anybody heal from childhood abuse to domestic sexual violence to pornography, infidelity, anything that you will read in there, you will get hope for. Or maybe you get a book for somebody that needs it, and you know somebody needs it. So for me, God gave me Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. That's Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. And when I read that verse, I had to let everything go, let everybody go, and just listen to God in his still small voice. So for me, spirituality was not religion. Religion is a set of rules. God hates rules, and you choke on rules. They don't heal you. Religion is a set of rules. Christianity is a faith and a walk of life and a relationship with Jesus. That's it. That's for me.
A relationship with Jesus. Well, that's awesome. And for me, spirituality is, I believe in God myself personally, but I understand those that don't. But I will tell you this, get some spirit in you, because you need some spirit to get through all the little things that happen in our lifetime. Trust me, you need it. You need at least spirituality, is what I would say to you. And without judging, because I don't, if someone says they're atheist, I said, fine, no problem. And I had a friend that was atheist for over 30 years, and finally she saw the light and said, you know what, you're right. And I was like, I told you, girl, you got to find some spirituality somewhere, because trust me, the devil will test you.
Oh, yeah.
You'll be like, oh, you don't believe in nothing? Oh, let me go see what I can pop up for you here. Trust me, you'll need it. And I believe kids who have some kind of faith, I believe they get, it gives them an up when they run into a situation. Instead of taking it out and saying, I'm just going to be here anymore, I just can't take it. They say, well, something will happen good. Because that's what I did. I don't know where I got mine from, because I didn't meet my mom until I was 7. So my forever mom. So before that, I was in the orphanages and the group home, whatever you want to call it. And so I don't know where I got it from, but I always felt like something was better than me and bigger than me that was protecting me. I knew something was. I don't know how, but I did. And I think that is what was my saving grace.
You had a guardian angel. We all have guardian angels watching over us.
Definitely had an angel. So thank you so much, Barbara, for being with us. I really appreciate you so much. You guys, make sure you go out and get the book.
Thank you.
Because it's, how do you say, it will definitely save or change a life. That's my quote, my personal quote that I made up, to save or change a life. That is what this show is all about. That is what her book is all about. So I hope that you will share this video for the fact that someone may be listening. There's so many people that didn't find out they were sexually abused until they saw something on TV. They have no idea, because especially if you're groomed as a kid, like 1 year old, you have no idea. You're trained to think that it's okay to play grit games or do this or do that. You don't know, and that's okay. So now if you know, or if you know of someone that doesn't know, and train your kids, people. Don't think that the kids are way smarter than you think they are, but but you
Yeah,
can
they
train them not to that. Oh, we don't sit on grown men's laps, honey. We don't do that. Because why? Because we don't know who is and who isn't. We just don't. So my dad was like, don't sit on nobody's lap. We don't have that problem, will we? Right? So you can train your kids for certain things without traumatizing them or making them scared. You know, there's ways to do it. You know, you train them like, that's your body and only your body. No one else is allowed to touch your body. You know, little things you can train them that they'll get that, wait a minute, why is so-and-so doing that? That doesn't, mommy said this is not right. So just think about these things, people, please, because think about these, all them 7.2 million children out there who are not getting help. Where are they? They're going to grow up to be the Jeffrey Dahmers and grow up to be the John Wayne Gacy's and grow up to be, you know, the Oklahoma bomber type people. So you got to be careful. You know, it's crucial that we do a safety net now and catch our kids and help our kids because they will be the future. So if they're traumatized at 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, oh, we are so done. That's all I can tell you. So get it together, families, parents, kids. If you know you're out there and you know someone's training you to do that to your sibling, you know it's wrong. It is wrong. And I don't know, while you have your hands in the lion's mouth, take it out slowly. So I know there's people in abuse situations that they absolutely cannot get out of, but plot and plan. I had a friend that planned for years. Her father was an abuser. Since she was, can remember, toddler, she doesn't even remember. And she planned and plotted. She said, one day I will get out of this. And she plotted and planned, went to the best college, had them pay for everything, and disappeared out of the blue. Disappeared, never to talk to again. So there's ways around it. Why we have to stay in so long, I don't know. But I do think that God brings us through everything for a reason. You know what I'm saying? Poor Lisa Steinberg is not here, but even she had a reason. Now we're thinking about her. We're thinking about how can we help children not go through this? We never thought about it before her. We never was like, oh, someone, you know, did what they did to her. No, we never think that. We would never think it. So now we're like, wait, let's be on our P's and Q's. So everything happens for some reason or another, good or bad. And we have to figure out how to process it and how to use it to our advantage and help people. So I hope today you learned something. And Barbara Joy Hansen, we thank you so much for taking time to be on The Town with Tanya. Hang out with me for a minute while I say goodbye to everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much for taking time. Grandma and Joe, I hope you're feeling better. Jen, my friend Jen, I hope you're feeling better. I love you. Blessings and blessings to you all.